A deposition tool the size of a delivery truck rolled out of a Beijing facility bound for a customer fab in Wuhan. Not a prototype. A production unit. Scheduled, invoiced, delivered in the same year the export restrictions were supposed to have made that supply chain impossible. The company that built it was Naura Technology Group, a name most Western engineers could not have placed on a map before the ban era. Now they can. That is the flip the rankings forced into view. The policy designed to starve China's semiconductor equipment industry of customers delivered those customers with a guarantee attached. 3 Chinese toolmakers now appear inside the global top 20 by revenue, a tier that, before the restriction era, was almost exclusively American, Dutch, and Japanese. Top 20 sounds distant until you learn where Naura landed. By the end of this, the mechanism behind that outcome will reframe what containment policy can and cannot do to an industry that has already been told it is on its own. The word to hold is starve. Here is what made equipment the chosen target in the first place. Semiconductor manufacturing tools sit upstream of everything. Deposition systems, etch chambers, metrology instruments, the unglamorous infrastructure of chip making are prerequisites. No tools, no fabs. No fabs, no chips. The logic of restricting equipment rather than chip designs was deliberate. Machine tools are harder to replicate than blueprints. The best-known case is extreme ultraviolet lithography, the machines that ASML builds in the Netherlands and that no other company on Earth produces at production scale. But the restrictions reach well beyond lithography into etch systems, chemical vapor deposition tools, and process inspection equipment, categories where applied materials and Lam research had built decades of dominance. The United States and its allies blocked a wide swath of this equipment from reaching Chinese fabs, with the explicit goal of freezing Chinese chip making at older production nodes. Think of it as banning the sale of precision lathes and milling machines to a country that wants to build engines. The engine design can sit on paper forever. Without the machine tools, that is where it stays. The assumption underneath all of this was that China had no domestic equivalent ready to fill the gap. That assumption had a shelf life, and it expired faster than the policy anticipated. Reports from industry analysts now place 3 Chinese semiconductor equipment companies inside the global top 20 by revenue. This is reported ranking data, not independently audited, but the company's own disclosures and analyst estimates align on direction, if not on the precise position. The entry into the top 20 is not the finding. It is the precondition for the finding. The analogy that comes to mind is 3 local breweries appearing in the top 20 global beer rankings the year after the country banned imports. You would want to know who was buying, and more importantly, why they had no alternative. Top 20 starts to look like a participation trophy the moment you look at who is sitting near number 5. Naura Technology Group, based in Beijing, now ranks roughly 5th globally among semiconductor equipment makers by sales, according to reported industry data. No single independent audit confirms the precise position, but multiple analyst estimates land in the same range. Naura builds etch and deposition systems, the same categories where Applied Materials and Lam research built their dominance across decades. Naura's revenue trajectory since the restrictions accelerated sharply, not gradually. The slope changed. Consider the scale. The top players in this market measure annual revenue in the tens of billions. Imagine the gap between a regional airport and O'Hare International, and then note that the regional airport added 15 gates in 3 years. The question is not how Naura found customers. The question is why Chinese fabs had no other option, and who structured that outcome. When foreign equipment is banned from a market, every buyer inside that market must source domestically. China's fab construction wave, representing hundreds of billions in announced investment, did not pause. The demand did not disappear. The approved supplier list did. Applied Materials and ASML were locked out of the fastest-growing fab build-out on Earth. Naura and its domestic peers were the only vendors in the room. This is the mechanism the policy created. The restrictions that were supposed to starve Chinese toolmakers of customers instead guaranteed those customers by removing every alternative. Every new fab constructed in China under the restriction era was a captive buyer that ASML would never invoice. The ban did not build Naura's engineering talent or its process knowledge, but it built its balance sheet, its production scale, and its ability to iterate on real yield problems inside real fabs. the learning by doing that no government subsidy check can replicate on its own. Imagine a city that bans all foreign restaurants. The local diners do not close. They expand, hire, and improve fast because there is nowhere else to eat. The policy designed to isolate them fed them instead. This is where I think the policy analysis consistently misses the point. People measure whether the ban worked by cataloging what China cannot do yet. The better question is what the ban constructed, and that answer is sitting in Naura's order book. But I want to sit with the counterarguments honestly, because the story is not as clean as the ranking suggests. First, sales ranking is not capability ranking. Naura selling etch tools for mature production nodes is not the same as matching applied materials at the leading edge. The gap between what China's domestic tools can produce and what the most advanced processes require is real, documented, and not closed. No independent benchmark confirms Chinese equipment performing at sub-3 nanometer production conditions. Second, captive markets produce reliable margins, not necessarily faster innovation. If Naura's customers have no choice, competitive pressure to push the technology harder is lower, not higher. The same wall that kept foreign tools out also kept foreign rivalry out, and competition is precisely what drove the iteration speed that made ASML the only company that can build an extreme ultraviolet machine. Third, some analysts argue the ban's real objective was never to stop China permanently, but to delay the timeline for self-sufficiency at the leading edge. A delayed capability is still a delayed capability, and buying time has strategic value even if the delay is finite. All three counterarguments are honest. None of them explain why the companies the ban was designed to prevent from competing now report revenues that place them in the same sentence as the incumbents. The gap is real. The trajectory is also real. Those two facts do not cancel each other. They coexist, and the policy has to answer for both. ASML and Applied Materials are not standing still. They remain the leaders at the processes that matter most for advanced logic and the chips that power large-scale machine learning hardware. But they have permanently lost access to the world's largest fab construction market for the duration of the current restrictions. Every quarter Naura operates at production scale is a quarter of yield data, process feedback, and engineering iteration that Naura's teams receive and that Applied Materials does not receive from that market. The incumbents did not merely lose sales. They lost the embedded learning that comes from being inside a customer's fab at the frontier of real production problems. That does not appear on a balance sheet. It does not show up in a ranking, but it compounds quietly, and I think that compounding is the most underreported consequence of the policy. The next policy question is not simply whether to extend the restrictions further. It is whether tightening them produces the same structural backfire at an accelerated pace, or whether the node gap remains wide enough that the calculus holds differently. That question does not have a clean answer yet. What it does have is a data point. The last round of restrictions built the room Naura now operates in, locked the door from the outside, and left the customers inside. The ban had one stated job: starve the upstream. It chose the right target because equipment is genuinely the choke point above every other layer of the supply chain. And then it created the exact conditions that made the target self-sustaining. A guaranteed domestic market with no foreign competition is the one structural advantage no rival can take from you by building a better product. I think the equipment ban made sense as logic and failed as policy, not because the goal was wrong, but because the mechanism guaranteed the outcome it was trying to prevent. The wall held. The industry it was meant to contain grew up behind it. If you were designing the next version of this policy with the Naura outcome already on the table, would you tighten the restrictions, reverse them, or try something structurally different? I want to read your actual argument in the comments, not just a take. If this kind of inside the mechanism analysis is what you come here for, subscribe and turn on notifications. This is what we do every week.